That's me, Graham. That's my brother, Richard. And that's a Vauxhall VX220, which we have filled to the brim with tents, camera equipment, and even a rubber dinghy. You'll see why in a few episodes' time. Join us as we embark on a journey of excitement and exploration around Scotland, a journey that began on a misty May morning, far before the sun was due to rise. Enjoy.
There he is.
Good morning.
Good morning. How you feeling?
A little tired, but
Okay.
excited. Right, I'm very steamed up. I'm keen to get a bit further down the road because she's quite noisy.
So you think we should push the car down the road a bit before starting her up, because it might wake the neighbours?
Yeah, push her a little bit and then I'll start her up.
I guess I'll be, seeing as you're already in, I'll
You'll
push.
be pushing? Yeah.
Alright. Okay, there we go. This car, with all its stuff in, probably weighs about 925 kilograms. Even though it's a naturally aspirated version, we have got a rubber dinghy and a tent in it. So, still not the easiest.
We're en route.
And the route was a long one. Starting down in Leicester, we had 376 miles to cover before arriving at a drag strip in Crail, on the east coast of Scotland, just north of Edinburgh. However, when we joined the motorway for the first time, just a short while into our journey, it wasn't quarter-mile times we were thinking about. Instead, it was the first negative aspect of VX220 life for the trip: the noise. While sat at 70 miles per hour, I turned the camera on myself to give an update on just that. And this is what it sounds like.
And the first thing you notice is how damn noisy it is.
The car has the same drag coefficient as an original Fiat 500, and with the wind smashing into the VX220's fairly flat nose, plus the considerable road noise, it creates an environment in which shouting directions is difficult enough, let alone recording an audible update or having a comfortable conversation with your co-pilot. It's truly a sweet relief to pull over after a few hours, even though the primary reason for our stop, in addition to grabbing some breakfast, was to check whether the car's heater was broken, as we couldn't believe its pathetic effort was truly the best the car offered when it left the factory 17 years ago. Turns out though, the heater was working as intended, which is barely at all. So once again we joined the motorway and waited for the sun to warm us up, knowing that our next stop was going to be a drag strip.
So 6.5 hours of driving later and we made it all the way to Crail. That's in Fife in Scotland, and we're about 5 minutes away from drag racing. So see you there.
Welcome to Crail Raceway.
Okay.
Cheers, mate.
Pound each.
That's not bad. Well,
I don't think that's for drag racing.
Is that not for drag? Do you think we're going to see another Vauxhall VX220?
Unlikely, I think.
2,000 were made for the UK market, thereabouts. Unlikely. Yeah, I concur. We made it.
Number 66, ready to go?
Pink bracelet means drag racer.
Yes.
Right, so get the car set up now. People take this really, really seriously. Like, people doing burnouts on the way up to the lines, people have slicks on and stuff like that. I think we're going to be a massive disappointment, actually.
It was a fair prediction. Neither of us had been drag racing before, we didn't know the system or the order of events, and other than being told that we needed to hire a couple of helmets because we were in a soft top, we weren't given any advice or direction. So when pulling up to the start line for our first ever run, it was clear Richard was nervous. We decided we'd have just 3 goes. After all, this was the first day of a long week of driving, and we couldn't risk breaking the car.
I feel like Brian O'Connor going up to his first race.
My concern is stalling it.
Thanks for that. I hadn't even thought of that.
He didn't stall. What he did do, however, is manage to get lost on a quarter-mile drag strip.
Where's the end?
I think you break way before the end. That's a shame if you were kicking ass.
Well, that was a little bit embarrassing.
A little embarrassing, maybe, but even that short run reminded us that we were sat in something special, and damn fast. That's because this car has some upgrades, and one upgrade in particular changed this VX220 from being quick to potentially supercar quick. So between runs we stopped off to let the car cool and confess to what makes this VX220 so special.
As you may have heard from the squealing sound coming from the back of the car during those runs down the drag strip, this car's got a secret weapon. It is a supercharger, and it gives the car some significant power gains. This VX220 has a 2.2 litre Ecotec engine that produces around 145 brake horsepower. However, with the supercharger installed, it now produces around 259 brake horsepower. Dizzying numbers. I think I need to sit down. Right, excuse me while I settle down next to this Miltech exhaust here. Another aftermarket edition on our VX220. If you look at the spec sheet for this car, you'll see it doesn't just say supercharged, it says stage 2 supercharged. But what does that mean? Some of you may know, others may have an inkling, but let's just clear this up once and for all so that we're all on the same page. Here's a 2-minute explanation on the car tuning stages.
So back in the day, there were 3 acknowledged stages of car tuning: 1, 2, and 3. A stage 1 modification can be added on its own, and doesn't need any other changes to the car in order to make it work efficiently. Examples of stage 1 modifications are air induction kits, sports exhausts, and minor engine remaps. They tend to be easy to implement, but also offer the least performance gains. Stage 2, like what we have on our VX220, offer more performance, but require extra parts to be added to the car in order to make the modification reliable and efficient. For example, a supercharger. In order to make this work properly, air intake, exhaust, and ECU mapping modifications are usually required. Then there's stage 3. They're the next stage up, and can be considered to be competition modifications. Like stage 2 mods, they also need other work doing to the car, but they're much more extreme in their performance, to the point where practicality is sacrificed. The want for power gains may make the engine idle erratically or even fail emissions tests. Stage 3 upgrades may also include racing brakes, which wouldn't be able to get up to operating temperature on the road, or super aggressive clutches, which would make driving in traffic near impossible. A quick look online and you'll see that companies also offer modifications at stage 4, 5 and above. These are less definable from stage 3, but essentially mean more extreme performance. So whether we're talking about performance, cost, time it takes to install, or in practicality, think of the stages like this. Stage 1 is a bit more. Stage 2 is a lot more. And stage 3 and above is all of it. The car had cooled, we had declared our modifications, and we were once again lining up on the drag strip. But this time we had a competitor. Introducing Man in Van. Well, technically there are 2 of them in there, but Men in Van doesn't make sense. Whilst we were really there to see how the supercharged VX220 ran the quarter mile in terms of time, we figured a bit of friendly competition never hurt. Sometimes though, competition can cause mistakes.
Jump the lights, yes.
Yes, he did. and the van still managed to get the better of us in the final few meters, but we had an indicative time, 13.9 seconds. This was a bit painful, as that's a tenth of a second slower than a bog standard turbo VX220, and from that we learned 3 things. 1. Skill comes into drag racing more than our ignorant selves had thought. 2. If you drive your car like you've got another 1500 miles of a road trip to go, you're going to be slower. And 3. Having your car full of tents, rubber dinghies and camera equipment slows it down. Who knew? I wanted to do some figuring out before our third and final run, so we once again switched off the car so that I could do some calculations.
Here's the thing. Since that last run was actually slower than an out-of-the-factory Vauxhall VX220 turbo, I feel kind of bad because it's just not representative of what this car is capable of. I want to get a more accurate approximation of what this car can do. So whilst Richard's off making friends somewhere, I've been doing some sums. There's an old myth on the internet, and as we know, everything that's on the internet needs to be taken as fact. The myth says that for every 100 pounds of extra weight on the car, it equates to a tenth of a second over the quarter mile. I imagine it's not as cut and dry as that in reality, but if I take this as fact, it makes things pretty interesting, so hear me out. I weigh 70 kilograms, plus we've got about 30 odd kilograms of fuel in the tank, plus we've got about 40 kilograms of rubber dinghies and camera equipment and tents in the boot of this car. Combine all that together and it means that this car is being weighed back by about 0.3 of a second over the quarter mile. Plus, for the next run I'm going to remove reaction time from the equation, simply because I'm pretty damn sure all the manufacturers do that too. The only thing I can't calculate out is driver skill. Richard's a really good driver, but this is our first ever time drag racing. Also, I can't calculate out the fact that we have got to take a bit of care of this car. We've still got about 1200 miles to do or something like that, so we can't risk power shifting through the gears or redlining it all the time. Nonetheless, I know what I want to beat over the next quarter mile. It's this, the Lamborghini Gallardo. It was released in 2003, meaning it was available at the same time as the Vauxhall VX220. It does 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds, and most relevant of all, it covers the quarter mile in a time of 12.4 seconds. I think beating this may be a stretch too far, but let's go find Richard and find out.
Richard wasn't far away, and he'd made a discovery of his own. He'd found a VX220 turbo, modified and putting out a similar amount of power as our own supercharged car, and he'd agreed to race them on our final run. So it was a supercharged VX220 versus a turbocharged VX220 versus a Lamborghini Gallardo on the stopwatch. This is how it went. Cautious from his previous false start, Richard's a little slow off the line. By the end of second gear, we're half a car length ahead, the instant torque of the supercharger proving more than a match for the turbo. By the halfway point, we were neck and neck once again. The turbo had reeled us in and was on its way past. And that's how we finished, half a second behind the turbo, whose top end speed was vastly superior to our own. We were beaten fair and square by the turbo. Whether down to driver experience, car setup or weight of luggage, I couldn't say. However, now the honour of our supercharged car rested upon its quarter mile time, and whether it was quick enough to beat the Lamborghini.
Here he comes. How did you do?
13.7.
13.7?
Yeah.
Not bad at all.
Not too bad.
What did you say your time was again?
13.7.
Right, 13.7, and then we take away 0.3 of a second for the weight. Okay, and what was your reaction time?
It was 0.67.
I'm rounding that up to 0.7. 13.4 minus 0.7 gives us the Lamborghini Gallardo's time, 12.4 seconds. The Vauxhall VX220's time, 12.7 seconds.
Nothing like starting the trip on a failure.
Yes, but let's go find some history.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks for watching episode 1. Tune in tomorrow when we find the birthplace of an F1 legend, solve a half-century old rather disturbing mystery, and enjoy our first thrilling drive on Scotland's winding roads. In the meantime, please do consider subscribing to my channel should you want to be kept updated with my newest videos. Thanks.